for you and your journey? I mean, you won that tournament for, I think it was about 250K. And then a month later, you got fifth in the Aussie Millions main event for close to, I think, 400. Quote me if I'm wrong.
Not sure,
But I'm
yeah.
sure, I'm guessing, and I'd love to know how you felt, but I reckon the fifth place in the Aussie Millions would have felt a little more bitter, even though you got more money. Like, what was it like for you?
Obviously, so like as a poker player, like as a tournament player especially, nothing's ever going, like you're never going to be satisfied unless you win.
You've had a lot of experience in poker, and I would say probably back in the day you were playing a lot more of the online presence sort of stuff, and you then really hit the felt and smashed really hard in, like, I think it was like 2017 or something like that. So it's like somewhere around there you just something changed for you in the live felt, and I'd love to pick your brain today. But first of all, yeah, thanks for jumping on here.
No problems. I don't know if I mean, yeah, you might be overstating accomplishments, but yeah, sure. I think it was around that time, yeah.
My job is to bring you on here, make you feel really good, and then I'm just going to extract as much out of you. So,
well, do you know what? It's funny that you talk about the live portion of it, because and that you want to talk about mindset and things like that. So, I'd actually been through a divorce in, I want to say 2015, but I mean, it had been a while of kind of like relationship, life problems, things like that had kind of gone down over those prior years. And as you say, like my focus was always online. I'd been playing live poker for an eternity, basically. So like I'd been traveling around and playing live poker for quite a while. But it's funny to tie in with the mindset thing was, it could be coincidence. Don't believe that much in coincidences, but a good friend of mine, Corey Kempson, actually, when all that was going down, he actually booked me a session with Elliot Roe.
Elliot Roe's a mindset, one of the gurus of mindset within poker, just for people who are watching.
Yeah.
He's a British coach, and he's worked with a lot of the big players. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And Elliot, I guess I'd always been stubborn or ignorant, or however you want to look at it, closed-minded to certain things, where I'd always thought that, and I'm still like this, which is that I always think I can deal with things myself, and that having a strong mindset, you can always kind of overcome things. And I think you become blind to kind of certain elements of yourself or your own behavior or whatever it may be. But just that kind of hour or so with Elliot, really kind of, I mean, it was extremely helpful. And it was, as I said, coincidence, no coincidence. I think a month after that, I had a series in Sydney, and that went particularly well. And then kind of over the preceding kind of 12, 18 months, live poker kind of went really well. I found that I was really present, and so as I said, I'm not a huge believer in coincidences, so there's definitely something to it. But yeah,
could we paint a bit of a timeline here? I'm curious of how this unfolded. So you're saying that you had your divorce, and then things were a bit rough for you on and off the felt, and then you had a session with Elliot, and then you had these results. So can you tell us a bit of the timeline of how that happened?
In July of 2018, so Sydney Champs, which was the series before the WSOP, it was actually prior to that, which was I got third in the 5K and second in the 20K, and then later in the year I won the 5K, and then in the January final 10 Aussie Millions Main following that. Yeah. So it was just prior to, it would have to be in maybe, like May of 2018 or something like that, around there, I would guess. Yeah.
And then you also you missed another event like about a couple months later after that, where you won a Wynn tournament in Vegas for like 80K US as well, right? That was that same time frame.
That's maybe true.
Don't worry, Matt.
Yeah.
I've done my research. I've seen your hand in mob. I know more than you do about your own life at this point.
Maybe, yeah. This is all, yeah. So, so it was just prior to that, and coincidence, no coincidence, whatever. But like, it definitely, yeah. I was very surprised at how light I felt after kind of doing that session with Elliot, and kind of as I said, I have a tendency to be quite stubborn and always think that I can do things myself, and I'm like that with a lot of things in life, whether that be poker, like studying. Definitely one of my pitfalls when it's come to poker is being a lone wolf all the time, and like kind of not being willing to collaborate with other people and things like that. And it's always kind of been the way with other things. So like, I'll just deal with it myself. I'll be all right, put my head down and kind of work hard, and I'll get through it. But it kind of showed me that I can be ignorant to some things as well.
So you had one session with Elliot. I'm curious. I mean, that a lot must have happened in that one session. I mean, he must have been able to really switch something in you. What did he do? Like hypnotherapy on you, or did what was it? Just more like talking about all of your deep dark secrets and just getting it out. Like what happened? I'm curious.
Yeah. So a bit of both, without going like too much into like the intimate details of it all.
Of course.
It was very much. So I think the whole thing with it being Elliot was that. So when I kind of go back to that stubbornness, I think that there's some trust issues that I have with other people. Like, I always kind of trust myself more than I trust someone else, for the most part. And when it came to that, I think that I knew that he was elite at what he does, and that he's a professional, and that he knows better than me. So I think handing over some of that control, and it was a mixture of both of the things that you just said. So it was kind of like discussing the things that or like opening up about things that I wouldn't open up to anyone else about, that wasn't in this professional environment where, this is a professional relationship, not a personal relationship. It's he is someone who knows, who's elite at what he does. Like, so I kind of trusted him to just like open up and speak to him about things that I probably haven't spoken to anyone about. And then there was a hypnotherapy portion of it as well, which I was very skeptical about, but got to me in ways that like I would never have expected. And again, I think a big part of that was handing over control. So I handed over control to him and trusted him and let him do his thing. And with the personal stuff, I guess, I'm very much a person as well who I don't like to put my shit, excuse the French, but like I don't like to put my stuff on like my friends. Like I'm not the guy that's going to, I try my best to not be the heavy friend or whatever, So I don't want to make my friends or like people around me, like their life, more difficult or more tedious or whatever. So I tend to keep a lot of stuff to myself and deal with it my own way. So it was probably a bit of release of like that type of thing as well.
So there's part of this that's like giving you permission to actually release what you've held on to as your lone wolf for so many years, and part of that's given you that sense of feeling light, you said earlier, which then helped you play a lot more clear when you're on the table. And it's funny you should say, like, having that release of, I guess, control, because when we talk about anxiety and depression, for example, anxiety often comes from a desire to take control. But the issue is the future holds so many variables that it's near impossible to control everything.
Yeah.
And so when you're playing poker, there's so many things going on that people feel anxiety, going up and down during the game, because so much can happen that's out of your control. But what you're saying here is, it sounds like, you know, when you worked with Elliot, you were able to really have a bit more psychoeducation around what you're doing, and also just release any extra pressure that's unnecessary in the game, right? And then so you can make a bit more sense about what you're doing, and that gives you a bit more clarity on the table, I'd imagine.
Yeah. So I think that it definitely opened my eyes to the fact that external. So we didn't talk about poker we probably spent less than 5 minutes talking about poker, and it opened my eyes to the fact that what's going on in your personal life or like outside of poker really, really impacts like how your ability to be able to make good decisions, basically. And it's probably not just for poker; it's probably the same for sports, and you know, that's why a lot of professional sporting teams have psychologists, and they have, you know, other mental coaches and things like that these days. Is because whatever's going on, you know, playing poker or playing sports or whatever it actually is, you know, maybe you're a day trader or whatever, you're always, whatever your decision-making process is always being influenced by everything else that's going on in your life or like in your head, basically. So it opened my eyes to that, is that, you know, there was a lot of stuff that's going on in my life over those couple of years that was hindering my actual performance, and I think a lot of that was kind of lifted away. So
that's really awesome to hear that little, like, I guess, success story, man, because like obviously I value this sort of work, man, and not just from only a poker and peak performance point of view, but just from a mental health point of view. I mean, I think I work as a counselor as well outside of poker, and you know, just having someone in that private, confidential setting, like you say, is so valuable to just really be brutally honest with someone, knowing that it's going to stay safe within that relationship to someone who knows no one in your community. And there's something really cathartic about that. So that's really awesome to hear that, man. So I'm curious to know a bit more about some of your experiences. The one thing I was always curious about, your online screen name was like MJW006. Does that have any correlation to like Alec Trevelyan from James Bond?
No, not at all. So
because you know GoldenEye, right? Did you ever watch that when you were a kid?
Well, I mean, I played
that
the
was
video
like
game.
one of my that was one of my and the video game, it was one of my favorite movies, and Alec Trevelyan was like my favorite villain. And there was one line he says in there where he goes to, because obviously most people would have seen James Bond, so this won't be a spoiler, but Alec ended up betraying James Bond. But there's a scene where he says, half of everything is luck, James, and then James turns to him and says, and the other half? And he says, fate. And then he starts betraying him, basically. And I thought maybe that might have been it. I was like hoping.
No.
So what does a 006 mean?
Well, so I can't remember when I made my Stars account. It'd have to be... It's a long time ago. But MJW initials. And then when I played rugby league for like 16 years. So pretty seriously. But like I was 6 or like 5'8" when I was playing rugby league. 6 was my favourite number. When I tried to make my Stars account, MJW6 was taken, 06 was taken, 06 was the next best thing. It's as simple as that. That was it. It was just like, well, how do I get...
Not exactly what I was hoping for, but that's okay.
I definitely not.
When I was on Stars, I was Brendan1717, and I don't even know why I chose those numbers, so I literally have no reason. I think because I was so young when I created, I was just like,
maybe you were
these
17.
numbers will do.
Maybe you were 17.
You don't need to go outing me on my own podcast. Yeah, so tell me a bit then. So if you played so much online, and you know, I dug up a little bit about some of the old coaching things you used to do. You used to do like little coaching videos for like online. I think you're still doing it, I'm not sure. But you know, you really made a big wave learning a lot online, and then you transitioned into live games. What's been the biggest difference with the live and online transition for you, and what adjustments did you have to make? Well, not fundamentally, by the way. Let's look at the psychological, the observations of like being able to play in person with people. Did that change much? Like those types of things?
I think so. Live, Yeah, so this is going back quite a ways now. So, because at the end of the day, I always played a little bit of live poker, and I was predominantly online, and I don't think that's ever really changed. I think still it's predominantly kind of online poker, especially with the whole pandemic thing, but like even prior to that, it was still predominantly online poker and then live poker alongside that. But over time, I definitely... so for me, live poker's always been... Okay, let's reverse for a second. One of the things I learned was to enjoy live poker more and to... I've never been someone who just kind of like sits and keeps myself at the live poker table. Like I always prefer to like have a chat and interact and like... because that's different to what I'm used to, right? So I think I always viewed live poker, and still do, as, yeah, sure, like, you're going there to make money, but it's also to break up the monotony of online poker and to enjoy seeing other people, social interaction, and those kinds of things, because it's never going to be as profitable as playing online poker from an hourly perspective. So it's a really bad decision for me to go and play a live series from an EV standpoint. So
because you're talking about volume here, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, especially with online these days, however much in buy-ins you can get in a single day, to travel to Vegas or to travel to, I don't know, name any spot, Brisbane, New Zealand, whatever it actually is, and pay for travel and pay for whatever to play a 5k buy-in or whatever. Well, you know, I can get in for, you know, 15k USD in buy-ins on a Wednesday, you know, so it's just like, it's not a good EV decision. I think early on in my live poker career, I guess you could call it, I took things far too seriously, or like, you know, wanted to do well at live poker and had this mindset of, you know, these people are so bad at poker, and like, you know, like that arrogance, the online versus live like arrogance that still gets carried around by people today. But I think when I definitely dropped that over time, because it became more of my mindset flipped from, you know, I'm going there to like destroy souls and kind of changed it to, you know, like you're going there to have fun and like interact with people and meet new people and learn about other people and like, yeah, we can play, like we're going to play poker and we're going to play as best as we can, right? But I think my mindset definitely shifted from this is like to relate it to real world, like rather than this is a business decision, to more like this is more of like a life EV decision. Like this is more.
Yeah, there sounds like there's a lot of just like characteristics about it being, or traits of it being more of a hobby, and like that part of it was really attractive to you to balance your life out. And like, you know, I'm sure no one really wants to go 15 years in a career just staring at a screen for 12 hours a day, like in a high like angst state, right? Like, so, and you're able to travel the world and go into different places and you know, do all the social things that come with that.
That's 100% true, and that's that was the other aspect of it is, you know, you travel, you know, because a lot of my friends are all dispersed all over the world, like all over Australia, all over the world, whatever it may be. Live poker trips are your chance to see your friends, to go out, you know, have fun, eat nice dinners, go out partying, like whatever it happens to be, like spend quality time with the people that, generally speaking, like we're in a unique situation where, well, I'm in a unique situation where a lot of my friends, the only time I talk to them is on a computer, you know, like it's pretty weird and nerdy and awkward, right?
But like,
but that's the truth. So I'm also privileged enough that, you know, I can travel to wherever and go and see them and spend time with them and whatever it actually is. So that's another really, really big part of it. And I know that through the pandemic and like speaking to other people, like some people that I haven't seen for quite a long time, there's been things said like, I can't wait until something gets up. Like, I don't care if it's like a $500 buy, whatever. Like, I'm going to Melbourne so that we can all get together or whatever, right? Like, I don't care if it's this, that, or whatever. Like, we're all just going to like go there and make it happen. So, which really shows that it's not about the poker at all. The poker is the excuse, and then realistically the reason for the trip or whatever is to see your friends. Yeah.
I feel that, man, too. Like, I mean, Vegas is one of my favorite trips because I have a few international friends who we go and we, rent the house and get a car and we play soccer and we go for dinners and everything you're saying. So I totally get that, man. And it makes me feel very blessed to have those opportunities, especially when something like a pandemic really takes that away from you. So yeah, like I can't wait to get out and do a lot more live trips and stuff as well. So yeah. I feel ya. So I wanted to ask you what your experience was like and what it was like to finally win a WSOP ring in Sydney. So talking about that specific event, I mean, it's one of those things where every poker player really aspires to achieve. Like, what was it like to finally get something so prestigious like that? Did it mean much to you, or was it just business for you?
Do you know what? No, it definitely means something to me. I think it was, but I think personally I was surprised that my overwhelming feeling was relief. So it was definitely celebrated, but like I don't think like it was just relieving. As I said, I've been playing live poker for since I've been playing poker, basically. Like I think I would have even like started playing ANZPTs in 2011 or 2012 or something like that. And I remember that when it came to ANZPTs, I think it took me like 13 main events or something to that effect before I even booked my first cash, right? So I'd been kind of traveling around and I'd played 13 ANZPT mains before booking even a single cash, and this was coming from someone who kind of was devoting their entire time to poker. And something kind of like, as I said before, there was definitely like factors that were on me in terms of like arrogance and like things like that played a big role in that, I think. Like always trying to like run the bluff, or like always playing too many hands, and like all of those things that were just straight out mistakes from a point of arrogance or ignorance or whatever it happens to be. But nonetheless, it took me a long time to book a first cash in a live in a bigger live tournament, and then even more so, it kind of took a longer time for me to have any real success in live tournaments as well. It took me a long time to win one, and I think it was only that year that I won my first one. I think a Marconi tournament that year, and then and I guess being surrounded, and this shouldn't really impact you, but being surrounded by a lot of people who had been able to transition online success into live success, and pretty much everyone that I knew had been successful when it came to live poker to some degree. And I was always a bit of the laughing stock of the friendship group, or like it was always the joke when it came to that type of thing. So it was I think a lot of that kind of led to it being more relieving to kind of get it done and like book a win and have that success for the first time. So
I find that really interesting. So like what you're saying, it sounds like you were surrounded by a bunch of really established players that were able to make that transition from live to online, and then for you, like achieving your result was like, oh, I'm now like with the rest of the pack. It's not like you've gone further than the rest of the pack, so it's like it feels relieving to then be there if you were the laughing stock, as you say.
Yeah, I don't even know if that was like, I probably shouldn't have spoken as much about that because I don't even know if the relief came from that place, to be honest. Because I'm very comfortable being the laughing stock or the joke, like that's entertaining to me. I actually think that there was more, like on reflection, I think that it was more relief to myself that I was able to do it. And it was more, I think that was where the relief kind of came from, was the relief that I am kind of capable, because with a lot of things, you can never be sure of something until you kind of prove that it's possible, or until you actually do something. You never know for sure that, so there's always like a seed of doubt until, you prove that it's possible. And I think that was probably the thing, was like, when you're doing it for as long as I've been doing it, say, let's say, like 7 or 8 years, like traveling around, like playing a lot of major live tournaments, Vegas, Macau, Europe, everything that exists in Australia. And I've been traveling around, particularly in the prior 3 or 4 years, like literally playing everything kind of major in Asia Pacific, and then full summers in Vegas, and had never been able to have that success. Like, I think that the relief was just that, was that it was now possible.
Yeah, I think it's a weird feeling, isn't it? Like, I mean, I've had situations where I've, achieved something like that, and actually, when I won my 5K in Sydney the year before yours, I remember crying. And the reason, and I'd been playing for 10 years, and I'd already had a couple of like big results that were kind of near that. But the reason why I was so emotional about that one actually was because I had my family there, and because it was in Sydney, and I'm from Sydney. When, as you say, you're traveling around a lot and you're playing everywhere, it's not often I'll actually have my really close support network, and I had a bunch of other friends there as well. So to have them all there to share that experience, and also, it was so prestigious to me as well, even though you have other results. And so something about it was like it is relieving, isn't it? Like later on, I think you feel more like I've achieved it, and that's great, and I feel proud, but like there is a relieving feeling. And I remember I felt like a weight off my shoulders, like, oh, I did it. I can certainly feel that mutual feeling that you're talking about. It's a weird thing when you go from like the online to the live stuff. Like, do you think it's let's say you won a big event online versus winning a big event live? What's the different feeling for you there? Because for me, like, I feel like I'd rather win like a 10K score in a small live tournament than like a 50K online one, because it's just such a different feeling. Hey.
Yeah, I mean, I still think that like there's probably a bit of similar in terms of relief, but at the end of the day, like for me, I would much prefer win like a scoop title or a WCUP title or a whatever it happens to be, like online than live, and I think that's just because a lot of effort goes into, and it's just a mindset thing, I guess, where I've dedicated a lot of time and study hours and energy to becoming the best poker player that I can be when it comes to playing online poker. Whereas, as I said before, like when I go and play live poker, I think there's a little bit of an element of like enjoyment and kind of going there to have some fun, and it's not quite as serious. Like, it's still serious. Like, you're still there to make money, as I said, but a lot more of it is there's a recreational aspect to it as well, where you kind of So for me, I think my like WCUP title or whatever would be valued deep within, higher than the WSOP ring. But even still, I don't think I necessarily look at I don't think I look at the WSOP 5K win or whatever as necessarily even an achievement for it being a WSOP ring or for it being, for carrying any prestige. Like, I think it was more just that, like, this was a relatively large tournament that I managed to get it done in. And I don't think it would have mattered if it was in, wherever it was, or like what title was on it. I think that it was more just the relief came from being able to get it done in, this relatively large tournament. So
it's kind of interesting when you look at the comparisons for like results in poker. So I guess for you and your journey, I mean, you won that tournament for, I think it was about 250k, and then a month later you got 5th in the Aussie Millions Main Event for close to, I think, 400. Quote me if I'm wrong. But I'm guessing, and I'd love to know how you felt, but I reckon the 5th place in the Aussie Millions would have felt a little more bitter, even though you got more money. Like, what was it like for you?
Obviously, so, like, as a poker player, like, as a tournament player especially, nothing's ever going, like, you're never going to be satisfied unless you win, right? Like, you're never going to be truly satisfied unless you win the tournament, which is not going to happen that often. So I think that's the first thing to kind of, like, it doesn't matter, like, what comparison we make, like, winning a tournament versus, like, winning a small tournament for whatever is always going to feel a little bit better than, but Aussie Millions Main, I don't think that I didn't feel bad about that one at all. Like, and I can remember a lot of it quite clearly, in terms of very early on, like, having a lot of chips on that final, and how things went down after that, and definitely kind of, like, did some analysis of it afterwards. But I think that Andrew Hendrickson, kind of, like, being in, who's a very, very close friend of mine, and, like, I know Mike as well, and Bren, who are both still in as well. So, like, wanting them to do well, especially Andy. So, like, being very happy for him, for how it went for him. And the fact that, I think I just enjoyed the moment there, which was that this isn't going to happen very often. It was a lot of fun. It was a hell of a lot of fun. And that's kind of like... And upon busting as well, is like, I played as well as I really could have, or, like, in my mind at the time, I didn't feel like I could have done much differently. And I'm sure that in saying that, like, I went back and looked at it, and there was definitely things that you can do differently and improve on and things like that. But at the time, I was fairly satisfied with my performance and, like, how I approached the final, and the tournament in its entirety, actually. And I still had friends that I was supporting that were still in the tournament, and so that was just, it was a lot of fun, that one. So there was
despite the fact that it was a lot of fun, and that, you mentioned that a lot of this live poker is recreational for you, you still would have felt a lot of pressure in that tournament, I imagine. I mean, you were on the main stage for probably hours on end, and I think it was filmed, right? Like, they had it was streamed, was it? The final table, at least?
I believe so, yeah.
So what? Yeah. So, like, how did that change in terms of your performance, in terms of a mindset stuff?
I don't think I thought about it really at all. Like, that might sound... I think that's the first time that I'd ever kind of, like, been up on the main stage at, like, Aussie Millions or wherever as well. But, yeah, I don't think that it really... one thing I've worked really hard on when it comes to poker in general, whether that be live or online, is being in the moment and, like, making my decisions. And, like, something that I've not just in poker, I've worked on it very hard in poker, but it's definitely transitioned into life for me, is one, being in the moment, and two, like, not dwelling on the past. So I'm not someone who ever misplays a hand or, like, gets sucked out on, or, like, whatever, and, like, dwells on that for a second longer than it needs to be, because the only thing, you can't change the past, and I live by this saying. People that know me will get sick of hearing it, but you can't change the past, just focus on the future. And that's something that I completely live by, which is once it's done, it's done. Like, you can only focus on like the thing that's in front of you right now and doing that to the best of your ability. And I think that mindset was probably all I was worried about, which is just like, play your game, do your thing, like play the next hand as best as you can. And obviously there's things that you need to think about, right? Like you still need to think about like, did he play this hand in a certain way? Like that's information, right? So obviously I don't ignore that, but in terms of like worrying and stressing and things like that, I can often be pretty stress-free because I don't worry about things that I can't control, and I just focus on whatever it is. So, I mean, I guess I'm going around your question a little bit, but
well, it seems like that idea of like the perception you have, and I guess the wisdom around knowing that, you know what, you can't change the past. Just focus on you know, making your future good, and so that has actually helped you live in the present. And so you mentioned being in the zone and feeling that focus. Like if you have that really clear perception on the past and future, well, then it just helps you live in the present, right? And just really like absorb the information that's in front of you and perform your best. It's very Buddhism.
Yeah. Being Korean and all, maybe it's just like in my blood or something. But I mean, from memory, I don't think that. I'm sure there was like some added stress or like some added form of pressure or something like that at the time, but I don't think it was like extreme or anything like that. I think that I was pretty relaxed the entire time, and maybe having like friends at the table or like people you know at the table as well. Had it been other people, like maybe it would have been different, but you know, Bryn was there, and having Andy was probably huge as well. There, who's like a really close friend, and like wanting him to do well. And I think the characters at the final table, I forget what the guy's name was exactly, but you know, I think he might have got fourth. But you know, there was always like a lot of fun and banter, and the environment at that final was really fun as well. Like everyone was chatty and friendly, and
just casually as you're playing for millions of dollars.
Yeah, and I mean that's yeah, and that's another thing, right? Is I thought about this recently. Actually, I talked to a friend about this recently, which was the money aspect of things. I'm very accustomed to thinking about money from an ICM standpoint more in a buy-in way. I like never really thinking about the money at all. So like very often, you know, I don't know what it is in my head, but I very, very rarely think about I'm playing for this amount of money or like this is what, because I think it adds extra pressure in. In saying that, what the discussion I had recently with a friend of mine was that maybe I need to change that, because you can become a bit robotic in situations where the money can be life-changing. And what I mean by this is sometimes like people don't realize, or like in the Aussie Millions, for example, the Aussie Millions Main, I forget what the payouts were exactly, but you know, you might essentially be playing a like $500,000 sit and go, right? Like if like with the value of your stack, like everyone bought in for like 500k or 600k or 700k, like how comfortable are you playing for that amount of money? And like how much will it change your life to like make this pay jump, or you know, finish in the top 3? And like, should you sometimes be navigating in different ways in order to and actually account for the real dollar values here? Because I think I'm notoriously very bad at that. I generally think of things in a very in a very one-dimensional way, which is just that these are my poker decisions, right? These are the ICM factors that kind of exist in this situation. How do I make the most money from like a theoretical perspective in this situation? And I attack it that way. But I think that there's definitely something to be said for thinking about, because if the money is impacting everyone else in a certain way, then they're going to be playing in a certain way, right? So what often happens is if you're attacking it from a theoretical way, then you put yourself on a path to kind of destruction, right? Where the best way to make the best theoretical decisions are to exploit the people that are worrying too much about the money and like put pressure on them, a lot of pressure on them, right? But often that involves in like this clash where they're essentially waiting for like a really good spot, and you're going to give it to them, basically. So like, I think that there's definitely like some balance that needs to be had when you go down those paths. And I'm not saying that's what happened at the Aussie Millions FT, like it didn't. But it certainly happened to me in other situations where I think sometimes you need to be more mindful of money, where I don't really think about it from a dollar perspective at all.
I suppose if you're looking to make money from the game, then yeah, you want to be absolutely maximizing your profits in every scenario, and all those nitty-gritty details that you're describing here. I mean, that's the real crux of what's going to separate like really great players who make money long term at this game, and just good players, I suppose. And when you talk about all the money differences and how that changes people's the way they play, that's a real poker game, right? Because it's funny, like I play soccer and all my soccer buddies always want to play poker against me, but the thing is, they'll always beat me because we're only playing for $10. But if they all put $1,000 on the table, I'll run all over them because it's going to absolutely change all their decisions, because there's so much more at stake and to be feared. And so you're describing that. Well, that's how you win at poker, when you're in those high equity situations and you put pressure on the people who have fear and who are going to like alter their styles. And so I suppose like you're not saying that that's exactly what happened at the Aussie Millions Main Event, but that's something over the last couple of years you've had a bit of a realization that maybe you need to put more pressure on more attention on other sides.
Yeah, so I think what you said then is actually a pretty good lead into what my main point was, which is basically that when you're playing a lot of online poker, making the repeated, like, recognizing when you can apply a lot of pressure and, like, running those situations over and over and over, or, like, in a weekday tournament or whatever, and applying the theoretical knowledge and the ICM aspects and things like that to all of those situations is really important. And, like, that's what makes someone a really good long-term winner. I think that I probably need to put more So, and then in your lifetime, unless you're Michael Adamo, like, you're probably only going to get, a handful of life-changing spots, right? In those life-changing spots, and I probably had 2 of them in my entire 15-year career or whatever. In those situations, it's probably really dumb I think maybe I've been really dumb in reverting to, or like just doing what I know and just playing the theoretical ICM or like poker game as I know it. And I think that in those life-changing spots, sometimes you're going to have to make a decision, or like you're not going to run out the long run in those spots. You're not going to. Like, you're not going to find however many iterations of that spot that you can find. So in those moments, maybe we need to revert to maximizing our dollar EV in this situation. And obviously, like, I haven't had a chance to like really think about this like in the moment and to apply this, because it's a discussion that happened recently in light of me playing a certain way in a
so I think I understand. I think I understand here. So you're saying that like you've played so many tournaments and have such a pretty deep understanding of how to win tournaments and get in those top 3 spots, or ideally winning them. But when you're in these really rare, huge equity spots where simply getting from 7th to 6th or 5th is like 6 figures, that's when you need to make those really acute, let's say they're exploitative decisions in terms of respecting the equity of jumping, of laddering. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and it's not even just laddering. It's literally respecting the equity, or like the dollar equity in this spot. And like, it might not just be laddering. It's still winning. Like, you still want to win, but like, sometimes maybe I need to give more respect to the dollars sitting on the table in some spots, because it's not something that factors in my mind really. Like, I don't think about like this is, and I've been conditioned over 15 years to think this way, which is that it's not a car sitting on the table, and it's not that, and all poker players who have been playing for a long time will understand this mindset, is that you have to turn off the real life dollar value that exists, and you become desensitized to what a dollar means basically in real life as well. Like, all my friends are like this, and then when you're playing, you kind of like are desensitized to the money value that kind of exists there. So yeah, I think that's maybe something that needs to be switched.
It's a really tricky balance, I think, because
Yeah.
I mean, when you describe that idea of being desensitized from the money, it's very hard to not let that bleed into your actual real life and then not value money in real life. And so then you'll make different decisions. It's like you have to find this balance where you do care about money, but you also don't care about money. It's a really tricky balance, eh? Like, how have you managed to balance those two?
Poorly.
Poorly. I love your honesty.
Yeah. No,
But it's a character trait that, like, I think really good players. I mean, I'll use Phil Ivey as an example here. I remember reading a bunch of his things early on in his career, and like people would always say that, he would always say that he used to be a huge gambler, and so he would go and just like lose all his money at blackjack and craps and all that stuff. I mean, I've heard all sorts of stories, and like even in Melbourne about him going up to losing millions in the craps table, like, and so, but part of that character is what makes him absolutely relentless and fearless on the table and gets results. But you do have to find this weird balance, hey?
You do, yeah. And I think that everyone will kind of be searching for, like, because when it comes to balance, right, like, what is the right balance, and who has it, who doesn't have it, like, how do you find it? It's a tricky one. But, yeah, I agree.
It's a tough one to balance. I'll admit that, over my years, like, I've been backed for most of my career, and I find that helps me a lot because I'm able to actually have someone else almost manage the money side of things, so I purely can focus on the game side of things and the performance and everything. I've certainly had times where I've backed myself and it's gone okay, but obviously I just feel like there's just that extra pressure. Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense. Like, you can just purely focus on like playing the best poker possible, or like that money isn't going to affect, like, if you bust this tournament, like, it's not going to affect like your future financial decisions at all, really. Like, you can just kind of go out and play. So that makes perfect sense, really. It's kind of smart. All right, so moving to just changing the topic a tiny bit here. Overall, I mean, as you know, like, I'm all about mindset and how we perform in game and everything. And it's been great to hear some of your experiences and things that you've learned along the way. I mean, it sounds like you're quite more of the on the mechanical side of things as opposed to the mindset until around about that session you had with Elliot Roe. But you've done a lot of coaching as well in your years, and I found some of those old coaching videos, and that was quite interesting to just see. But you're very much about the theoretical side of things, it would seem. But what would you say is like your number one, I guess, mindset thing that has helped you overall, by and large, in your career?
Yeah, so it'd have to be the thing I mentioned earlier, which is that you can't change the past. Like, you can only focus on the future, which is often in poker, that's the next decision. And that's a really hard thing to execute. And I think at times, like, at times I have to, you're not always going to execute that perfectly, right? Because to say that losing the flip, like, with 10 players left for the chip lead for whatever is not going to, like, that you can just, like, fob it off like that, like, is nonsense. Like, no one can really truly do that. But if you kind of, like, if you kind of can revert to that, which is like me reverting to, well, I can't change it, so move on, right? Then it allows me, especially when you're like 10, 12, tabling online or whatever, and that might happen 4 hours into your session, and you're going to play 12 hours, like, you need to be good at that. You need to be good at, all right, what's done is done. Let's just, like, move on. And you need to be able to get over it really quickly. So that's been the biggest mindset thing for me in my career and life. So
you naturally... Yeah, right. Even in your real life, that's interesting too, yeah. So I would say that's probably, come from the endless amounts of hours of 10 tabling, 12 tabling. I mean, you know that, well, if I bust this one, it's all good because I've got many more going, and I just need to keep focusing on the decisions I'm making now for my present and future, I suppose. So I guess, like, when you translate that into a live game, it's almost like second nature for you to, even if you lose a hand in the live game, you don't have 12 other games going on simultaneously, but in your mind that that's okay, there'll be another tournament tomorrow, or maybe I'm not out of the tournament, so I've only lost half my stack and not my entire stack. Does that sound like it's like second nature to you now in live games?
Yeah, partially. I think the biggest part of this, for me, I'm a highly logical person. So for me, I relate, like, I'm just a highly logical person. There's a lot of poker players, like, I'm sure people that, would listen to this would be, like, really logic-based. The real logic in all of this for me, and the thing that makes it really easy for me, is that you literally cannot change the past. So it doesn't even have anything to do with the future. Like, I can't change it, that just happened. So, like, what's the point in me, like, stressing about it, worrying about it? Like, what's the point in me wasting my energy on something that I can't change? It makes no logical sense at all. So I think I've flipped the logical part in my brain to understand that really well, which is that it doesn't matter how much I, like, huff and puff or, like, get upset or, like, get angry or, like, whatever it happens to be. Like, I'm wasting energy because I can't change it. Like, it's already happened. Time is linear and we can't change what just happened. So, like, no point wasting energy on it. And I think that sentiment, or, like, that logic, has allowed me to actually live that way, I guess.
I think that's some serious wisdom, man. Because, like, I guess, like, as you were talking there, no, it is, man. It really is. But, like, one of the hardest things to actually implement that in real time is the tricky thing called our emotional brain. It's a whole different part of our brain that acts differently and it acts irrationally. So yeah, we can sit here in a podcast and talk about how, yeah, that's a really logical mindset and everybody knows it when we talk about it. But when you're in it, it feels different. And so I guess when we refer life events to poker events, it is actually really hard to make sense of something. So take two scenarios. So we've got poker where you lose a big hand and it's really, like, tormenting your mind and you feel emotion as a result. Yeah, you can't change it, right, now, but you feel something, and I would say that it's grief, right? In a real life event, you might lose a relationship or lose a loved one, and you don't just think logically, oh, well, I can't change that. You actually are trying to make sense of why the hell it happened in the first place and how I could have maybe prevented it from happening. So we're in a stage of grief in terms of a psychological, perception or state. So I think that happens in poker. You lose a hand and you're triggered in this psychological state of, what did I do? Could I have prevented it? And you run yourself through, like, how did this happen? Did I do something wrong? Maybe I didn't. Did the other person do something to me? Have they got it in for me? Like, your mind is just, like, goes on this crazy tangent. And it's really difficult to manage the emotions that are attached to that. So yeah, I love your wisdom behind it, but I guess what I'm trying to figure out and help people with is, how do you put that into play in real time? It's a tricky thing, hey?
It's very tricky, yeah. And as I said before, like, I'm not perfect. Like, it's hard. It's very, very hard to, like, perfectly. It's very easy to say it and it's hard to execute it. But I would almost say that, like, that mindset when it comes to poker has been a drawback for, like, my personal relationships. Is that it does, like, you are kind of like exactly how you described it there. You are switching off a part of your emotional brain by kind of using that mantra, I guess, like, in certain ways. And in your personal relationships, you're often expected to have the emotional brain switched on more. And I think I've been very bad in my life at flipping from my work brain and my personal brain. And I think that's been to a very large detriment of my personal relationships. and as you've talked about earlier, is like there has to be some kind of balance. So like while I'm really good at it here, like I'm also really good at like, you know, living that mantra over here, but it often isn't needed over here, right? So if anything, like you asked the question like, how do we kind of achieve that or whatever? Like, I'm not sure because it comes very naturally to me at this point in time. My real issue would be like, how do I kind of like flick my emotional brain back on, if anything, you know?
I see a pattern with a lot of poker players who are at your level, you know, who have this sort of success in like, you know, over long periods of time. And I think that that's kind of what it is. It's like actually most poker players really struggle to get out of the emotional and into the logical and into the purely like strategic and don't make irrational tilt plays or whatever. But the leak, I suppose, for the really good poker players is they often struggle in real life to be able to turn the other way. So it's exactly the same concept as the money thing. You have to find the balance of caring enough but not caring at all. It's a similar thing. It's kind of I'm having an epiphany in our conversation right now.
Yeah. So 100% agree. You're on point.
Yeah, it's tough. It's so tough. Yeah. So okay, cool, man. Well, look, that might be a great place to leave it. As I have a lot to think about after our conversation. As I just said, I've come to my own epiphany here. So, man, it's been great just having a chat with you and just hearing a bit about your experience and what's helped you and where you're at with your journey. Because as we all know, life and poker is a practice. You'll never master it. It requires like daily, conscious effort to actually keep doing well. So. Lovely to see you. I hope you're well, and I look forward to seeing you at a live event soon. But thanks for being on here, man.
And you too. Thanks for having me.